Hey everyone, we're doing a deep dive today into some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
It's all about unemployment claims.
Right.
We're going off of that U.S. Department of Labor news release,
Mm.
the one you sent over.
Yeah.
I know it's not exactly the most exciting thing to read.
Not exactly a beach read?
No, not at all. But believe me,
Yeah.
hidden inside all those tables and all that jargon is a story about the U.S. economy.
That's right.
A story that could really have some big implications for your career.
Absolutely. These reports, they're not just about numbers.
Yeah.
Right. It's about people.
Yeah.
And they can actually give us some really interesting clues about where the job market's headed.
So our mission today is to decode all this data.
Okay.
We're going to pull out the biggest trends and figure out what it all means for you.
Sounds good.
And get this, more people are claiming unemployment benefits now than a year ago. I was actually pretty surprised by that.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the report.
Okay.
See what's really going on. The report focuses on the week ending January 18th, 2025.
Okay.
So that's our starting point.
Good place to start.
Okay, so the first thing that jumps out at me is the rise in initial jobless claims. So for anyone who's not familiar with that term,
Right.
initial jobless claims, that's basically the number of people who are filing for unemployment for the very first time.
Yep.
And for that week, claims went up to 223,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a jump of 6,000 from the week before.
Okay.
And even the 4-week moving average,
Yeah.
which kind of helps to smooth out those weekly ups and downs.
Right.
Even that climbed to 213,500.
So we're seeing an upward trend
Yeah.
in the 4-week average.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Right.
Could be a sign that this isn't just a temporary thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a bigger shift happening in the job market.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the insured unemployment rate.
Okay.
This is the percentage of people who are actually getting unemployment benefits.
It stayed about the same at 1.2%,
Okay.
but the actual number of people getting those benefits, that went up quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it jumped up to 1,899,000.
And do you know what's interesting about that number?
What's that?
That's the highest it's been since November of 2021.
Wow.
So even though that rate stayed the same,
Yeah.
a lot more people needed those benefits.
Okay, so we've got rising initial claims, a higher number of people getting benefits.
Right.
And if we compare these figures to this time last year, like I said earlier, that increase in people claiming unemployment is even more obvious.
Yeah.
So what does this mean for the economy overall?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Are we seeing signs of a recession coming?
Right.
Or is this just a little bump in the road to really figure that out?
Yeah.
We got to look at what else is going on in the economy.
Okay.
What's happening with hiring?
Right.
Are there certain industries that are having more trouble than others?
That's a great point. And speaking of specific industries, the report actually highlights some states that saw the biggest jumps in those unemployment claims.
Okay, which ones?
Michigan, California, and Texas.
Interesting.
Michigan in particular had a lot of layoffs in manufacturing,
Okay.
while California saw losses in agriculture.
That's interesting. Those industries have been facing some challenges lately, right?
Yeah.
Like automation in manufacturing. That's been a big topic.
Yeah, definitely.
And then agriculture has been dealing with droughts and rising costs in some areas. I wonder if those things are playing a role in those job losses.
I bet they are. And for our listeners, this is where it gets really relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're in those industries,
Right.
especially in those specific states, this data is a little bit of a wake-up call.
It is. It's a good reminder to, be aware of those bigger trends that are affecting your field.
Yeah.
And to always be thinking about how to stay ahead of the game.
The report also lists out the states with the highest insured unemployment rates.
Okay.
Minnesota, Washington, Illinois, and a few others.
Okay.
And while we won't go into each state's specific situation right now,
Right.
it's really important to remember that these numbers represent real people and families who are going through some tough times.
You're absolutely right. A high unemployment rate, it can really affect entire communities.
Yeah.
Businesses,
Yeah.
housing markets.
Yeah.
It's not just about one person losing their job.
Right.
So the impact on everyone.
Yeah. Okay, so we're starting to get a clearer picture of what the data is telling us. But before we jump to any conclusions, I think it's really important to remember that this is just a snapshot in time.
Yeah. One point in time.
We need to look at the bigger picture.
A whole thing.
Consider other factors before we, hit the panic button.
Right. And, not all unemployment claims are the same. There's so many things to think about.
That's a great point.
Like some of these claims could be from people who were just laid off temporarily,
Right.
because of the season or because the company's restructuring.
Okay.
Those people, they might be back at work soon.
Yeah.
And then you have people whose jobs are gone for good because of automation or technology.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it really is. There's definitely more to look into here.
For sure.
So let's dig a little deeper into those details and
Okay.
try to make sense of it all.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
One thing that people don't always think about when we talk about unemployment
Yeah.
is the difference between temporary layoffs
Yeah.
and people losing their jobs for good.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
So just because someone files an unemployment claim, it doesn't automatically mean they're out of work forever.
exactly.
Yeah.
Think about industries like construction or tourism,
Right.
where things naturally go up and down during the year.
Okay.
Companies might lay off workers when things are slow, but they plan to bring them back when things get busy again.
That makes sense. So those temporary layoffs can actually make the numbers look worse than they really are.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, we have to think about the long-term effects of things like automation and technology.
Right.
As jobs get automated, those workers might have a really hard time finding new jobs.
So even if the overall economy is doing well,
Yeah.
some people might still struggle to find work because the skills they have aren't needed anymore.
Right. And that's why it's so important for people to be proactive and be able to adapt.
Yeah.
We can't just assume that the jobs we have today are going to be around forever.
Okay, so we've got temporary layoffs, we've got automation,
Yeah.
and then there are things like demographics and how many people are actually looking for work.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right.
A growing population.
Right.
Or more people actively trying to find jobs that can also affect those unemployment numbers.
You're totally right. It's like putting a puzzle together.
Exactly.
We need to look at all these different pieces of information to really understand what's going on.
And, economics isn't an exact science.
Right.
There's always going to be room for debate and different interpretations.
That's why we love having you here to help us make sense of it all.
Oh, well, thank you.
So we've talked about the need to look beyond the headlines and dig deeper into the data.
Yes.
But how do we actually do that?
Right.
What are some resources or strategies that our listeners can use to stay informed and stay ahead of the curve?
Well, the first thing I'd say is stay up to date on those economic reports and analyses from sources you can trust.
Okay.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics website is a great place to start.
All right.
They've got tons of data on employment wages and all kinds of other economic indicators.
That makes sense.
You can also find some really good analysis from think tanks and research institutions.
Okay, that's good advice. Any other tips?
Yeah.
It can feel overwhelming trying to sort through all that information.
Definitely don't just focus on the national data.
Okay.
Pay attention to what's happening in your own industry and your region. Industry publications, trade associations, even your local news, they can all give you valuable information about what's happening in your part of the job market.
Right. Because what's happening in Michigan's manufacturing sector might be totally different from what's happening in California's tech industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, sometimes the best information comes from just talking to people.
Yeah.
Networking.
Yeah.
Build relationships with people in your field, go to industry events, and really stay connected to what's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised at how much you can learn from those conversations.
It's all about connecting the dots, right?
It is.
The data gives us the big picture,
Yeah.
but the real insights come from understanding the context and the human stories behind those numbers.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've decoded the data, we've analyzed the trends, we've explored some strategies for staying informed.
Right.
But I think that the question on everyone's mind is, what does all of this mean for my own career? What can our listeners actually do to make sure they're ready for whatever's coming next?
That's the goal, isn't it?
It is.
To help you make smart decisions about your future.
Okay, so we talked about all these trends and challenges, but I think what our listeners really want to know is, how do they navigate this job market and make sure their career is, on solid ground?
You got it. It all boils down to being proactive and adaptable. The job market's like a river. It's always flowing in changing direction.
And if you're not paying attention, you might get swept away. So what can our listeners do to stay ahead? What are some actual steps they can take?
Well, first things first, take a look at your skills and experience. Really look at them. Ask yourself, are these the skills employers are looking for right now? And just as important, what are those skills going to look like 5 or 10 years from now?
Okay.
If you're in an industry that's facing big changes, are you learning new things? Are you getting the skills that will be in demand?
I love that. Don't just wait for the change to happen, right? Anticipate it and be prepared. Be proactive.
Exactly. And don't forget about networking. Build relationships with people in your field. Go to events and really make an effort to know what's going on. You never know when a conversation could lead to your next big opportunity.
That's true. Sometimes your next job finds you, and you're more likely to be found if you're out there and you're engaged.
100%. And remember, it's not just about getting a job. It's about building a career. What are your long-term goals? What kind of work will make you happy and be something you can do for a long time?
I think those are really important questions for our listeners to think about. We've uncovered some pretty big trends today, but in the end, it's about how you respond to those trends. That's what will shape your future.
Absolutely. The way we work is changing faster than ever. Learn throughout your life, stay curious, and be open to new things.
To wrap it all up, unemployment claims are going up, which might mean the economy is changing. But like we talked about, it's not all bad news.
Yeah.
By staying informed, being proactive, and adapting to change, you can handle these shifts and create a really successful career for yourself.
I totally agree. We've given you a lot to think about today.
We have. So as we finish up this deep dive, here's one last question for you to think about. What can you do right now to take control of your future and create a career that's both resilient and rewarding?
Remember, you have the power to shape your own career.
Stay informed, stay curious, and stay empowered. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. See you next time.